A dramatic arrest took place when a stubborn woman faced off with the police after a traffic stop. Although there were no clear signs of a violation, her actions and words escalated the situation, making everything tense and unpredictable. Was she truly innocent? Or were all her justifications merely a cover for a surprising truth? Would her decisions help her escape this predicament, or push her toward an unavoidable outcome? Stay tuned to discover the unexpected twists in this incident. On that day, like any other ordinary day, the police diligently carried out their duties, and there was nothing too surprising. A routine traffic stop for a minor violation that didn't warrant any complications or controversy. Just a simple mistake, changing lanes improperly, a violation that most people could easily make in a rush or out of distraction. But who could have known, the story wasn't that simple. The woman, when stopped, instead of complying like everyone else, turned the stop into an impressive performance, as if she were preparing to star in a grand play, with her as the main character, of course. There was no sign of cooperation or hesitation. She had decided to take an uncooperative stance to the fullest. Her words seemed scripted. "I just want to go home," she exclaimed, with an expression as if she were standing before a judging panel in a grand competition. This was not a confrontation with the police, but rather a presentation on a reality TV show, where every word she said was an absolute truth that could not be denied. "I haven't been drinking, I haven't caused trouble, nothing," she continued, in a decisive tone, as if she were explaining herself to a respectful and eager audience. It seemed as if everything around her was part of a grand performance, and she was the leading star, always right in every situation. If no one knew better, they might think she was participating in a reality show where every word she said had to be listened to and understood deeply by the audience, or at least the police. But in reality, she had forgotten that this was not a competition, but a real legal situation, where uncooperative words couldn't change the facts. Her dissatisfaction was not only expressed through words but also through actions. Every explanation she gave made the situation even more tangled and tense. What started as a simple matter was turned by her into a righteous battle, where she was the oppressed, and the police were the misunderstood villains. Indeed, if one didn't know the full context, it would be easy to think she was trying to save an unjust situation rather than just resolve a minor traffic violation. In the end, what she failed to realize was that her excessiveness had taken everything too far. Instead of simply accepting the mistake and moving on, she chose to transform this trivial situation into a fierce struggle, as though she were confronting an oppressive system, rather than just a traffic stop for a minor violation. She became the heroine of her own story, and every word she uttered wasn't just an excuse but an uncompromising form of resistance. However, it seemed that her excuses couldn't shake the determination of the police. Perhaps they had become too familiar with situations like this. Traffic violators always had a myriad of reasons to explain themselves, blame others, and try to cover up their mistakes with seemingly reasonable but unrealistic arguments. The statement, "I didn't do anything wrong," with its confident tone, might sound like a sincere justification, but in reality, it couldn't overcome the invisible wall she had built for herself, the truth. It was an undeniable truth, one that she had to face, whether she liked it or not, and no matter how many times she repeated, "I didn't do anything wrong," it couldn't change that reality. The car, no matter how innocent it seemed, was still parked on the white line, silently waiting for an unchangeable decision. It couldn't defend itself, and all her reasoning couldn't alter the position where the car was standing. The police weren't drawn into the story she was trying to create because they were not just law enforcers but people who had witnessed countless similar situations with explanations that never seemed to end. They weren't easily persuaded by illogical arguments, because for them, everything had clear rules and regulations. No matter how much she expressed her dissatisfaction or insisted on her innocence, the car remained where it was, and the police still had to do their job, making a fair and reasonable decision based on what they saw and what the law required. She might console herself by saying she hadn't done anything wrong, but in the eyes of the police, everything was clear. A violation was a violation, and no words could hide that truth. Her story gradually turned into a struggle between self-justification and the so-called legality, where no matter how many times she asserted her innocence, it couldn't change the obvious truth. The car was still parked improperly. And in the world of law, that truth was the most important factor, one that could not be hidden or denied. No matter how much she repeated, "I didn't do anything wrong," those words were like an echo in the air, unable to pierce through the solid wall of reality. This is the difference between theory and practice. In theory, everything can be justified, but in practice, sometimes the truth is simply unchangeable just because you refuse to accept it. And the car, no matter the reason, would still remain there, and she would still have to face the consequences of her actions. How can we understand the feelings of the police in situations like this? They, who have repeated the question, "Can you cooperate with us?" thousands of times throughout their careers, have likely become so familiar with the unreasonable answers. Over time, they've developed an unshakable patience. But with this woman, their patience was being tested to the fullest. Instead of simply accepting the request for cooperation, something that many other violators do to quickly complete the process, she chose to turn this traffic stop into a sophisticated battle. The police, instead of doing their usual job of checking documents and traffic conditions, were dragged into a verbal resistance they were not prepared for. It could be said that in the eyes of the police, every answer she gave, every excuse, was a new piece in an old movie they had watched too many times. Other violators might easily recognize that with law enforcement, they were not the main characters in a TV drama. But this woman seemed to be living in her own illusion, claiming to be the heroine in a tense movie where all eyes were on her and every word she said carried immense importance. But in reality, what the police saw was a situation becoming more complicated, with each passing second, the tension rising, with no sign of relief. Instead of everything becoming simpler, like the countless other situations they had handled, she was trying to make it more complicated. She took control of the conversation, and in doing so, she unintentionally made everything more awkward, like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any moment. Although it seems like she is acting with purpose, delivering dramatic gestures and words, the reality is that the situation is even more out of control. The police are not just facing a typical traffic violation, but also a psychological standoff. Every word she speaks is not a cooperative response, but a stone thrown into the calm waters of the job they have done thousands of times. No matter how patient they are, no matter how accustomed they are to the excuses and justifications from violators, in this moment, they cannot deny the feeling of being challenged, even irrationally so. For them, silence and cooperation are always the easiest and most necessary choices. But this woman, with all her determination and stubbornness, has made everything uncontrollable, like a game where only she thinks she can win. So how can the police deal with a situation like this? How can they maintain their composure when everything she does seems to be designed to escalate the tension? Every reason she gives, every act of resistance, is not just a response, but a weapon that makes the situation even more awkward than ever. While the woman may think she is in control, in reality, her words only push her and the police into a confrontation no one wanted. She may think she is acting to achieve a goal, but in the eyes of the police, she is just making things harder for herself. The police, with calm and experienced eyes, immediately recognize that this is not a simple situation. He, who has dealt with countless traffic violations and other tense situations, now has to face a woman who is not only uncooperative but also creating her own performance. Her first statement clearly shows she has no intention of easily accepting the truth. "I'm not the driver, why should I get out?" A declaration that, upon hearing it, everyone would wonder, what's going on here? This question is not just a justification but a complete denial of all the factual elements, to the point that even the experienced officer feels stunned. Despite their familiarity with complex situations, facing a woman acting in this context is not always easy to accept. She is not only refusing to cooperate but is turning this encounter into a long speech about, "I didn't do anything wrong." She seems oblivious to the fact that she is in a legal situation, not on a stage where everything she says is important. It's as if she is preparing for a speech before a national jury with abundant confidence, but lacking understanding of the rules she is supposed to follow. Then, in a moment, she continues with another challenging statement, as if she is participating in a heated debate with a grand prize. "I'm not the driver, why should I get out?" This statement not only stuns the police but probably anyone nearby, not because of its intelligence or sharp reasoning, but because of its irrational disregard for reality, leaving everyone surprised. How can someone deny something so obvious? How can she think she has the right to decide what's right and wrong when everything is clear in front of her? The police, with all their patience and experience, have likely encountered countless traffic violators with all kinds of excuses, from awkward apologies to convincing justifications. But this woman is clearly not a typical case. Others might have stayed silent, admitted their mistake, and hoped the situation would quickly end. But she decided to stand firm in this confrontation, turning the conversation into a psychological battle, not only with the police but also with the very basic rules of society. And this makes everything more complicated than ever. The more she speaks, the more she stretches the situation, building an impenetrable wall that the police cannot break through with simple requests for cooperation. It is no longer just a traffic stop, it has turned into a tense standoff, where every word she says is a tactic to delay and break the calm of the police. Anyone nearby would surely be astonished by how she uses words as a tool for combat, challenging the patience of law enforcement. While the police just want to resolve the situation quickly, this woman seems to be enjoying the attention, turning this confrontation into a play where she is the star. While she may think she is acting to protect herself, in reality, she is only making the situation more awkward, pushing everything into a dead end with no way out. With a professional lawyer demeanor, she immediately turns her car into an impregnable fortress, where every request and regulation from the police is considered invalid. She is unwilling to undergo any test, because she has decided that no one has the right to ask her to do anything, even for her own safety and that of others around her. What started as a small traffic violation has now turned into a tense negotiation, with her refusing to come to any agreement. The more she talks, the more she makes the situation tense, like an action movie where the protagonist is the uncooperative person. No hero, just a central character trying to avoid responsibility. At this point, the police are no longer just dealing with a simple traffic violation, but have to participate in a complex psychological battle. Instead of just asking her to show her papers or do a simple test, now they have to engage in a prolonged negotiation with someone determined not to negotiate, as if she were an international diplomat negotiating difficult terms. The tension in the air, from her resistance every step of the way to the police's calm and patient attempts to resolve the situation, makes everything look like a confrontation between an experienced law enforcement force and a brilliant resistance artist. When the police ask her to do an eye test to assess her driving ability, no one expects that, instead of complying quietly and cooperatively, she would turn the situation into a live television interview with no one else involved. In the stillness of the traffic stop, she boldly denies the police's request with a firm statement, "No, I won't." Her tone and attitude make it seem like she is participating in a contest of who can challenge the police the best. At this point, the police feel not only professionally challenged, but as though they are participating in a very harsh test of patience, almost standing before a mental challenge rather than a simple traffic stop. This did not stop there, as she then demanded that the entire incident be recorded. It seemed as though she thought she was filming a documentary about the police force, and she was the central character being interviewed under the observation of millions of viewers. The police were bewildered, unsure of how to feel, whether surprised or confused. Meanwhile, the woman, with a serious expression, continued to assert without hesitation that she was in perfect health, with no physical or psychological issues. The only problem she claimed to face was the overacting of the officers, as if they were deliberately creating a tense situation that she hadn't asked for. She didn't even forget to emphasize that this was just an unnecessary performance, making it hard not to smile at her determination to assert her innocence. Indeed, in life, sometimes you can unknowingly become the leading star in an action film you never signed up for. And in this case, she wasn't just playing the heroine in her own movie, but was also trying to control every situation, making everyone around her see her as the winner in this game. Though no one else was involved in her movie, it was clear she succeeded in drawing attention, causing the police to constantly adjust their requests and actions to keep up with her in this battle. When all her justifications failed to convince the police, the law enforcement finally decided it was time to wrap things up. What they had called listening as much as possible had reached its end, and there was nothing more to say. She was officially the arrested person. But instead of facing the situation calmly like any normal person, she resisted fiercely, as though she were a Hollywood star caught in the most intense scene of her career. With a dramatic expression, she immediately declared, "I'm not the driver, why should I be arrested?" If one didn't know, they might think she was playing a character in an action film, an innocent person caught in a grand conspiracy, rather than a woman facing the law for a traffic violation. She seemed to think she was the main character in the movie superhero, the innocent, with a special ability to bend any rules, and so how could she be arrested for anything? The more she resisted, the more the situation spiraled out of control. She was like a rabbit caught in a trap. The more she struggled, the worse things got. It felt like a net tightening around her, and with every movement, every protest, the situation became even harder to resolve. She was creating a vortex of tension, in which every action she took only complicated things further, as though in an endless action film. At this point, the story was no longer just about a traffic violation. It had become a life-or-death battle between a woman refusing to surrender and a calm, unshakable police officer who would not be swayed by any excuse. With every passing second, she seemed to be fighting against herself, her freedom, and the sense of being threatened by the strictness of the law. Every time she declared her innocence, the police became more confident in their decision. The scene became a mental battle between the citizen and law enforcement, like a play where everyone wanted to win, but no one knew how it would end. After being arrested, the police remained silent, as though participating in a silent competition, and presented a special reward, a breathalyzer test to measure alcohol levels. But don't think this was a simple request, as their announcement was not just an order, but a heavy warning about the terrifying consequences if she dared to refuse, as if refusing to blow into the breathalyzer would result in an immediate death sentence. But instead of being worried or frightened, her response was as if she were the winner of a bizarre competition. She stubbornly denied everything, as though the police had asked her to do something impossible. She not only refused to take the test but also insisted that she had done nothing wrong. Her explanation sounded like something out of a humorous action movie. "I didn't drink, I'm just a victim of a misunderstanding." She said this with such confidence, as though the whole world had turned against her, and that was the only reason she was being treated so unfairly. Her feeling was like that of a hero in an innocent film, where she was always on the side of justice, and everyone around her was wrong. She seemed to be playing the lead role in a TV series, where every event revolved around proving her innocence, regardless of the clear evidence before her. She didn't just feel misunderstood, she believed she was a victim of a grand conspiracy, with the police as the unintentional or intentional ones pulling her into this play. In fact, if you take a serious look, she could be the star of a long-running TV show called I'm Not Wrong. Each episode would revolve around her rebutting all accusations, finding loopholes in the law, and fighting to prove her innocence, never accepting that she had done anything wrong. In the end, after a series of legendary confrontations that seemed to have no conclusion, she had to face an unavoidable outcome: being charged with obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and driving under the influence. However, despite the evidence being as clear as daylight, she remained steadfast in her belief that she was entirely innocent. Truly, she seemed to be playing a game called Who's Innocent, and in this game, she was certainly the winner. She stood firm like a warrior, confidently declaring that all the accusations were a huge misunderstanding, a baseless nightmare. In her eyes, logic and facts seemed like insignificant details, unworthy of consideration. But no matter how confident she was, the court was not a TV show, where contestants can walk away with a gold cup and a shining smile after every match. Here, it was reality that determined the outcome, and the result was an irrefutable judgment. While she might still live in the shell of someone who hasn't made a mistake, the law doesn't have room for vague excuses. She had to face punishment, not because she lacked belief in herself, but because she had failed to comply with the most basic rules of society. It was a profound lesson about power, adherence, and responsibility, a story that we can all learn from, to understand that sometimes resistance not only complicates everything but also forces us to pay the price. But in her eyes, this story might forever be a strange adventure full of reason, a journey that no one truly understands, a journey in which she believes she is the only one who sees her goal clearly. In her world, standing up against the doubt of the law could be an act of a brave warrior, while others are merely outsiders who will never understand this game. In the end, everything was one big misunderstanding, but no one could deny that she was the main character in the story, even if the result wasn't what she had hoped for. The story between the woman and the police was not just a traffic situation. It was truly a valuable lesson about obeying the law and how each person reacts when facing authority. This story seems like a play, where every character has their own role and traits, but in the end, there can only be one winner: the law and the rules we all must follow. The woman in this story, despite her justifications and resistance, seemed unaware that her actions were only making the situation more tense, making everything worse. In reality, her denial and resistance only highlighted one truth: power and the decisions of the authorities are not easily challenged or changed simply because of a few personal reasons. When she continuously refused to cooperate, every justification became a meaningless excuse, and in the end, it didn't just make the situation tense but also led to unavoidable consequences. Her stubbornness and resistance against the police's patience was like a test of the limits of both sides. In this society, respecting regulations, whether small or large, is always the basic element to maintain order and protect fairness. The greatest lesson from this story is, You're not always right, and sometimes silence and cooperation are the keys to avoiding unnecessary trouble. It is an acknowledgement that sometimes, rather than resisting and trying to explain everything your way, accepting the situation and cooperating is the fastest way to get out of trouble. What we learn from this story is that power is not always easily challenged. No matter how justified we feel or how right we think we are, sometimes the only way to keep peace in a situation is to respect the authority and decisions of those in charge. We may feel frustrated, but only by learning from our mistakes can we realize the value of patience and cooperation in tense situations like this. Through this story, we see that resistance doesn't always lead to a good outcome. On the contrary, knowing when to remain silent, when to cooperate, and when to be patient is the key to unlocking the door out of unnecessary difficulties. The law is not a game to test intelligence or persuasion skills, but a system that everyone needs to respect, even when we don't fully agree with it.